And there she is, at the very beginning, at the very heart of it all. The kids sing, Mary had a baby, my Lord, Mary had a baby, my Lord. What did she name him? What did she name him? There she is, front and center in every Christmas pageant, and the creche across the street, and on the front of many a greeting card in art, kitsch, or classical. Indeed, what would be the story of Western music and art without Mary? Think of Schubert's and Verdi's Ave Maria or Stabat Mater, the settings of the Magnificat, Mary's song from Luke's Gospel by Palestrina, Monteverdi, Bach. Vaughan Williams, think of the portrayals of the Annunciation by Fra Angelico in Florence, Crivelli, El Greco, Grunewald, Turner, even Dali. Think of the beautiful nativity scenes in every century and style on canvas. The paintings of Madonna and Child have been so frequent that scholars say it would be possible to trace the history of the idea of childhood on the basis of them. Think of the Pietas, especially that haunting one in St. Peter's by Michelangelo, and that fourth of the great basilicas in Rome, to the honor of the Lady, Santa Maria Maggiore. And as in music and art, so she has been central in the piety of Christians over the centuries, a place she still holds in the hearts of millions in this secular age. There are estimates that over 200 apparitions of Mary have occurred since 1930. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, where the fuse was that lit World War I, the Virgin appeared in 1981 at Medjugorje, a Croatian village of 250 families. And since then, 20 million pilgrims have visited it from all over the world, including the North Shore, at times in spite landmines and sniper fire. Or there are the healing powers of the Virgin of Lourdes and Fatima, which have received certification at the highest levels of authority. When the Pope was shot and gravely wounded in St. Peter's Square on May 13, 1981, he ascribed his survival to Mary. How could I forget that the event in St. Peter's Square took place on the very day and the very hour when the first appearance of the Mother of Christ to the poor little peasants has been remembered for 60 years at Fatima, said the Holy Father. One thinks of the Black Madonna, especially the celebrated icon in the Polish city of Częstochowa, the primary symbol of Polish culture and nationhood. Or the appearance of the Virgin at Guadalupe in 1531 to an Indian, and the fact that she now is called the unofficial, the private flag of most Mexicans, the Mother of Mexico. And next to the Lord's Prayer, the prayer to her is the most prayed in Christendom, beginning with the words of Gabriel at the Annunciation, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. And even at our Protestant weddings, we sing the angel song, Ave Maria, set to the music of Gounod or Schubert. Maria, she was Miriam, in the Hebrew tongue of the town of Nazareth, but in all its variations, it is the most popular female name in the history of the Western world. I dare say there are some Marys here this morning. Now, I have no desire, nor is it my place, to explain or explain away the history of this intense devotion to Mary, the Mother of Jesus. Suffice it to say that it is, in a way, outside the realm of my own religious experience, but I say that remembering that we, at least my Protestant friends, are a distinct minority in worldwide Christendom. I do have to wonder whether Mary the Mother has not drawn so many to her over the centuries, because right over those centuries the image of Jesus grew more stern and magisterial, took on the face of a judge and a king, and Mary provided a way to God and the Father of Jesus that was more warm and maternal and accessible. In any event, there's a pleasant story told in Catholic circles about the time Jesus accosted Peter at the gates of heaven and berated him for his laxity. Peter, you're not being careful enough. We're getting all kinds of riffraff in here who just do not belong. You've got to tighten up on things. To which Peter responds, "But Lord, I'm not letting these people in. I send them away. But they go around to the back door and your mother lets them in." And I do wonder if this may not be another instance where we who do not follow Rome may not have thrown out the baby with the bathwater, or rather the baby's mother. The problem with the Reformation, you know, is that it was a reaction to practices that undoubtedly had become questionable. Zwingli in Zurich, who along with Calvin shaped the minds of American Protestantism, your minds more than most are conscious of, insisted on stripping the church of all images. Listen to this contemporary description of what happened just 300 years ago. The committee as a body, you know immediately it's a Presbyterian church. The committee as a body went into every church in Zurich. Once inside, they locked the doors behind them, and then, free from all disturbance from the curious crowds without, began to dismantle the church. Every standing statue was removed from its niche or its base, and together with the base taken out of the church. It was then either broken up by the masons, if made of stone and plaster, or burned if made of wood. Every painting was taken down from the altars and burned outside. All murals were chipped away or scraped off the walls. The altars were stripped of all images and vessels. All votive lamps were let down and melted outside, and all crucifixes removed. And many of the most prominent victims of this zeal were representations of the Virgin. Thank God it didn't last forever. You realize you're sitting in a sanctuary which, both from aesthetic and theological perspectives, is high medieval Catholic. But this attitude was not even universal at the time of the Reformation. Luther honored Mary and sought to find the real woman behind the accretions of doctrine and superstition that had grown up around her. She was and is, after all, the mother of Jesus, the one who gave him to the human story and to each one of us. So let me try and rehabilitate her a little bit this morning. If we go to the New Testament, we find the explicit references to Mary few in number, and most of them quite brief. She was there in the birth narratives, of course, the Annunciation, visit to relative Elizabeth, the ride from Nazareth, the birth in Bethlehem. She goes to Jerusalem to perform the ritual purification rites required of all new mothers in the law. She returns there with her son for his bar mitzvah and manages to lose him temporarily on their journey home. She's there for a wedding in Cana and provokes his first wonder when the wine runs out. She is there beneath his cross in the company of the disciple John when he dies. Before he does, Jesus commits her to the care of John. She's one of the first at the tomb on the first day of the week. She's in the upper room with the disciples following the resurrection experiences. If you have visited Ephesus, you may have visited the house where tradition has it she lived out the rest of her life with John. So what is there to say for Mary? Well, let's peel back a bit the theological overlay in our story and simply think for a moment about her situation. As the story begins, she's really a young girl, undoubtedly no more than 14 years of age, with no resources of her own, totally dependent upon family, living in a very traditional Near Eastern village of maybe 20 families, 200 people, very poor, very traditional, most of them living in caves, and she is pregnant but not married. Having this child and staying in that town under those circumstances represents the risk and terror of ostracism, disgrace, and on the basis of religious law, even death by stoning. Yet she hears God speaks to her, sees his angel appear to her, and of course that solves everything, doesn't it? The angel appeared to me. Sure he did. And he said, I'm going to bring to life the Messiah of Israel. Sure you are. But when the story says that the angel spoke to her, told her all this, her response is quiet and simple. Let it happen to me as you have said. Whatever you say, Lord. In the midst of a situation over which she had no control, which she does not understand, where she can imagine no future that is not foreboding, she surrenders herself to the will of God. She does not understand, but she trusts. And Luther, 15 centuries later, remarks that here we have it, real faith, pure and simple. In 1522 he writes of Mary, faith for her did not require information, knowledge, or certainty, but a free surrender, a kind of joyful wager on his unfelt, untried, unknown goodness. This kind of faith snatches us away from ourselves and places us outside ourselves so that we do not depend on our own strength, conscience, experience, person, or works, but depend on that which is outside ourselves, that is, on the promise of God. Do not be afraid, Mary. Faith as surrender to God in the midst of circumstance over which we have no control. Faith as trust where we can see no way ahead. Faith as submission to whatever life may bring. We're not very good at that kind of faith today. Faith is courage to dare great things, to conquer the market, the latest disease, to build empires and dynasties. That's more our style. We latter-day children of Prometheus. But acceptance and surrender, these smell of weakness, subordination, victim status. This is why the ideological feminists don't like Mary. She seems a model of subservience to the male god and his hierarchy. Never mind that some of the strongest women through the centuries have found precisely in her inspiration and strength. Never mind that Mary is not subservient to every fool who comes along. Never mind that the real strength to deal with life and care for others may lie precisely in such surrender to the will of the eternal. You see, in our glorification of assertiveness, power, aggressiveness, domination, we may very well be capitulating to a style, to a substance which in the end is bound to be a bit of a fraud and futile. What if Mary's quiet trust in God is the source of strength against a troubled spirit within and a condemning crowd around, strength that enables her to have him, grow him, stay by him at his death when all the males have fled in terror save one, a strength to go on hoping so as to run to the tomb and finally greet him somewhere out beyond it all. I ran across a marvelous story recently, 11 people hanging from a rope from a helicopter that was rescuing them from some disaster. 10 men and 1 woman way up in the air. They all decide that the rope is fraying and at least one should let go and fall because if not, the rope may break and all will die, but nobody can decide who should go. So finally, the woman gave a real touching speech saying how she would give up her life to save the others because women were used to giving up things for their husbands and children, giving in to men, not receiving anything in return. When she finished speaking, all the men started clapping. But I do wonder, and I can only wonder, having never been there. You've heard of the man waiting outside the delivery room, pacing back and forth, and the nurse comes out to announce that he's the proud father of a new baby girl, and he exclaims, "A girl. Thank God she will never have to go through what I've just gone through." The women are laughing. But I do wonder if women in pregnancy and birth are not more likely to get in touch with the meaning of real trust and thus real life, for by the nature of it all, they enter into a situation where they are not in total control, where the risks are numerous and scary, and where they must surrender themselves to a process larger than they are. And so perhaps they are more able to deal with dependency, more sensitive to the human situation, namely that none of us is ever totally in control. Men make things. Women share in God's creation of the future. Indeed, bringing a child into this kind of world is a triumph of hope against the headlines. It is the willingness to believe that there will be a future worth living for that child, for us all. Forgive me, I try to say this in the little poem I wrote for this Christmas. O little town, Still little before the walls of Zion, streets dark and lonely against the lights of Ashkelon. O little town of dirts and rocks, scattered, shattered glass and empty inns. Donkeys and taxis a few, but no one to ride beyond the checkpoint's rim. O little town where incoming shatters the air of deserted streets, and behind the battered walls women shudder in fear and weep, and men stare for loss of hope bent neath their daily grind. And no carols nor candles bright speak this year an everlasting light. O little town, the fears of all the years still meet in thee tonight. But hopes, how hard in all this brokenness to see, to find, yet even here and there, with faith and courage near insane, a Miriam or a Rachel struggles in that primeval east of Eden pain, brings to this little town a Jesse, Sarah, or a John by name, and in that defiant act, submitting to the birthing God, makes one small move against the tribal hate and firepower, still offers the few who look and love hope for another tomorrow. Let it happen to me as you will. But this trust is not just for Mother Mary or Barbara or Jennifer. It is the trust that saves us all whenever our resources in life run out, when we really cannot change things very much. Wherever we walk through dark valleys, it is the trust of surrender out of which arises the strength of spirit to deal with whatever comes with joy. Dr. Raymond Galt died a little over a week ago, beloved physician for a lifetime here on the North Shore. He once spoke of himself as a servant of the people. Then he suffered a severe stroke about 5 years ago, which left him quite helpless. Jane, his wife, took care of him to the very end. You can imagine how limited, how circumscribed her days became. But friends began to notice something, that she was able to do this with a kind of contentment and peace at which they truly marveled. She showed no signs of either resentment or exhaustion, remained cheerful and upbeat through it all. Jane told me I could tell you this, provided I made it clear that it was not in the end about her. One of her friends raised the question one day, how do you do it? She said, well, after the anger and the questions about why this had to happen to me and how could I possibly deal with this, I got to the point where I said, well, Lord, what do you want me to do with this? And I put it in God's hand, and I found grace, the grace to live with peace and fulfillment and even joy. Every morning I would say a prayer, surrendering another day to Him. At times Ramey seemed quite with me, at times not. But I found grace to live each day. It certainly seems to have given you great strength, I said to her the other day. Of course He did, she responded. We have an incredibly loving God. A lot of people are going to face deep waters. Tell them that. There really is grace for our times of trouble. Maybe it'll help somebody. Maybe it will. Lord, let it happen to me as you have said. Ave Maria, Hail Mary, full of grace.